No problem. Thanks, Nuala. So I'll talk a little bit about myself. My name is Kam Knight, and I am a coach, writer, and author of nearly a dozen books in the area of mental performance. And in my own journey of healing and growth, I have traveled to nearly 100 countries around the world, and not just in tourist destinations, but as one of my friends had put it, like I really left no stone unturned, and I really didn't. I was interacting with people of indigenous backgrounds from all over the world, whether it was the Maasai in Africa or the Kuna in Panama or the Inuit in Greenland and everything in between because I had some very severe mental and emotional challenges since I was a child. And growing up, I thought it was a phase that I was going through because like most people, it's not uncommon to be a little bit hyper or erratic or even a bit out of control when you're young. And the expectation was that I would grow out of it. And unfortunately, I didn't grow out of it. It got worse and worse. I became increasingly erratic and let's just say, for lack of better words, destructive, and not just to myself, but people around me. And I went on a path of healing, and I really, as I mentioned, left no stone unturned looking at books, doing the traditional routes of therapy as well, and going deeper into pretty much every area to start forming kind of my own ideas of what was going on and internally for us humans and how I could more or less bring healing to myself. And information that I have been able to gather, not just for myself, but in my own coaching, people have really enjoyed and resonated with. And I think Nawala puts it best. The kind of information that we bring is not the kind that you can learn from books or from someone else. It comes from when you've tried everything and nothing has worked. And so just want to welcome you guys all to our first live. And, we want to bring you some really fantastic content that hopefully can make some shifts for you in positive ways. Happy birthday. Yeah. All right. So for this month, we're going to dive into habits. Now, when people hear the word habits, they will probably think like, oh, I know about habits and I've heard about habits. And it's a word that gets talked about and thrown out a lot. But I think there are a lot of misconceptions to habits, and there's not even really a clear definition. So we're going to start off by really kind of defining what habits are and how they work. And that will help people really kind of open their awareness to how much habits are influencing their lives, both positively and negatively. So I'm going to start off by just saying that defining habits. Habit is an activity that you have done so often and so regularly that it almost becomes automatic and then permanent. And sometimes, in the thing is, you don't, when it becomes automatic and permanent, you don't think about doing it, you simply do it. And sometimes you're not even aware that you're doing it. And as I mentioned, everyone is talking about habits, but no one's really talking about what they are and how they work. So I kind of want to help people understand there's like three main aspects to habits. First is, as humans, we're made up of life forms so small that they can't be seen with the naked eye. Billions and billions of molecules come together to form the cells in our body. And then billions and billions of cells come together to make tissue. And then the tissue combinations form muscles and organs. And together, these muscles and organs form systems like the digestive system or the nervous system. And all these systems and muscles and organs and tissues and cells come together and line up for a specific action, for a specific way of being, and for a specific pattern of behavior. Now, it's really important to understand that it took years for all those cells, tissues, muscles, organs, and systems to line up to function the way that we do. The way we talk, how we respond to people, the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. It just didn't happen out of nowhere. It happened because all of these little parts came together for us to be able to do that. And in many ways, that's what a habit is. And that's one of the big challenges of breaking a habit or changing a habit, because all these, every part of us down to the cells need to rearrange and realign themselves for the new behavior. And that doesn't happen overnight. And that doesn't happen, simply by talking about it. It takes time for that to happen. Yeah. 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 So then second, anytime like a memory or an action is performed, grooves are created in the brain. So when you hear people talking about neural pathways, this is what they mean. And the more we do or think about something, the deeper these grooves or neural pathways get. And the deeper that they get, the easier or and more natural it becomes to perform the behavior or the action. But at the same time, the more locked in we become to that behavior or action, because anytime we want to do something different, our mind wants to follow the most deep or most deepened neural pathway. And that usually ends up being what ends up becoming the habit. And so when we look at habits in that perspective, then there's also a mental component to habits, is that we have these mental grooves that are uh, making it easy and natural to do a behavior. And the mind will rather follow those grooves than some other grooves. And again, these grooves aren't formed over a few days or even weeks. It takes time. And if we expect that we should be able to do something different as well as what we've been doing already, then we're really setting up ourselves for failure, because it's almost like a mental limit, a mechanical limit in the mind that prevents or makes it difficult to start that new behavior. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I can imagine when you were doing that, what was going on, like in the brain is pretty much like, all right, I have two different paths that I can take. This one has already been laid out for me, and it's going to be easier to just go and do it as quickly as possible. Whereas the other one, there's going to be a little bit of fight and resistance. And I'm just going to go through this one and not even let Noala even have a chance to make a choice about it. And before you know it, the elbow's on the table. Yeah. 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 The mental, yeah. 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 Yeah, well, it kind of relates to what you were talking about. There is also an emotional component. So we kind of talked about the physical component of all the cells, tissues, and muscles lining up for a specific task and activity, and it taking a while for those to change and rearrange. And then the mental component was the grooves forming every time we do a behavior. It gets deeper and deeper. And just because we want to do something different doesn't mean those grooves are gonna miraculously disappear. And that takes time too. But the third, and my personal opinion, most important component is that um, there's an emotional component to habits, and that is every thought and action that we have, it actually releases emotions. So anytime we're doing something, no matter what it is, emotions are being released. So if you're having an enjoyable conversation, the mind is releasing emotions of joy. When there's work that we don't want to do, then our mind is releasing emotions of dread. Or when we're playing video games, a different set of emotions are released. And even as you guys are listening to us talk, there's different emotions that the brain is kind of sending to your body. It might be of confusion, maybe boredom or fascination or curiosity to know more. The point is that no matter what you're doing, feelings and emotions are constantly being released. But the thing is, over time, our body can be addicted to those emotions. In other words, emotions are nothing more than a series of chemicals, like the chemicals in caffeine, energy drink, and even cocaine. And just like the chemicals in caffeine, energy drink, or cocaine, our body can become addicted to the chemicals in our brain. And since the chemicals of emotions or the chemicals in our brain are released from an activity or behavior, we can become addicted to the activity or behavior. In many ways, habits and addictions, Noala was saying they're different, but in some ways they can be similar because we become addicted to the emotion that the activity releases or causes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, if we kind of get addicted to those emotions, what happens is we just start chasing it. So whether it's puppy love or even deeper love, we'll go from one puppy love to another one, just to get that emotional hit. And and if we're not careful, if it becomes addictive or become habitual, it will orchestrate our life where we will get mad at somebody and break up just so we can go find somebody new and get that hit through that puppy love. And then once we've gotten that hit, we'll do something or find some flaw in that person to not be interested in them anymore, and then find another person where we get that hit. And yeah. On to the next one. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, and when we think about narcissism, what that is, there's an emotional component because when we kind of feel this positive feeling of being important or better than somebody, or even having this view that we did something great, well, feelings are released, right? And if those feelings can become addictive, just like another chemical, then we need to continually get that hit. And then we kind of chase that feeling of being, or not chase, but that narcissism ends up it starts to build if we're not careful. And it's kind of crazy because there's like so much stuff that's going on internally that's really driving our external behavior. And we may think that we're doing something for one reason, but it's just because, yeah, yeah, yeah. Safer setting. Yeah. It's in some ways I can't it can be, but one of the thing about habits is that just because we can't stop a behavior or just because we fall into a pattern, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's because of habit. There are other causes that can do it too. So it can be a result of anxiety or emotional or trauma, past trauma, but even our insecurities. If we are insecure in a situation, how our internals respond to it could be different. Somebody who is insecure could probably shut out and probably not be very talkative. Another person's response to that insecurity would come out in kind of the behavior that you're talking about, more aggressive. So it may not necessarily be a result of habit, but if that person is not careful, it can over time turn into habit. So, given the model that we presented, it's how our cells come together, how our neurons or how our mental grooves form, as well as emotional addiction. So, any behavior that we do, if we do it long enough, it'll start to become more permanent and difficult to get away from. Even if that behavior was a result of some other issue, as I had mentioned, emotional trauma, insecurities, and things like that. So if this person who's coming in, who's this gamer that you described, the hypothetical person, and they're having, what they're doing is kind of not good behavior conducive. And if they keep doing it, if they're allowed to continue, over time, it can be kind of difficult for them to stop. And the thing is, they won't even know why they won't even be able to stop, because if somebody tells them, hey, you have to, this is not the way to behave, if it becomes habituated enough, the inner thoughts will make them think, oh, well, this person's crazy, and I don't want to talk to this person, and they'll find situations where they can express that habituated behavior. Yeah. So the habit goes in the mode of protecting itself, because that's what a habit is. If the habits didn't do that, they wouldn't be very good at what they did, now would they, right? Yeah. 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 When they have nothing to do. And this is actually brings up a good point, because one of the things I realized in my journey, especially when I was traveling, is that as humans, we need to be active. We need to be active and engaged. And if we notice, we're always doing something. In fact, when you look at things like social media or even gaming, one of the reasons for their popularity, it's a boredom killer, because it gives us something to do. Otherwise, if we don't want something to do, we tend to be a little bit irritated and things of that nature. Well, guess what? If you don't have a good avenue to put the need for the body to do something and be engaged, guess what? We can end up eating. And many people do. They kind of eat out of boredom. But when it comes to the emotional aspect, I think is really also important to understand is how we feel after we eat. So if we're not supposed to be eating a lot and we start eating a lot, and then afterwards we kind of feel bad and have shame and guilt, well, we can become addicted to those emotions. And just to get a hit of that, our body will orchestrate behavior that will cause us to feel shame and guilt. And if we normally get that shame and guilt from overeating and not eating healthy, then we'll fall into a pattern of overeating and not eating healthy, just so the brain can release those negative feelings, and then and our body can get that hit of like, yeah, 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 Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. How we talk, the types of people we talk to, the conversations we have those people can all become habituated. We can all become habituated to them. In fact, what you'll find, the older we get, is that our unconscious, we do it unconsciously, we tend to find people with whom will reinforce our either emotional issues or our habitual patterns. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's huge. And if those people move, they'll find similar people like that, and it'll be unconscious. And we can fall into a pattern of just like being tired of somebody because they're not conducive to the healing or the growth that we want, but then we'll just move and find somebody else who kind of replaces that person and not even realize it. And then on the external, it may seem like, oh yeah, this person's very different. But something deeper is going on where the behavior is still the same that you replace a person with, or the interaction you have with that person is very similar as well. Yeah. Yeah. Who have already made it. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost zero, to be honest. I mean, you opened up a huge can of worms that I can, rip on the different points you've made. And the first thing I want to say is that one of the challenges, the things I really struggle with for quite some time, when I was becoming an author and getting my business off the ground, is I was hanging around with people who were doing the same thing. And initially, I thought, yeah, this makes sense because we can all help each other grow. But there was nobody in the group who really understood what it took to be success. It was the little shifts, the little things that were necessary, but they couldn't offer me that, and I couldn't offer them that. And as a result, we kind of continue to kind of stay at the same plateau. And I have done this to myself quite a bit, not just recently with business, but even in school and whatnot. And when I think back to why I did it is because it was more comfortable with them, because I was in the same level, on the same page. We could kind of share the same struggles. So that comfortability was what drew me to them. But if I really wanted to take it up a notch, I needed to get out of my comfort zone and be around the people who were doing what I wanted to do or had the level of success already. And what was interesting is that they weren't doing anything big or drastic that was different. It was these little things that you just had to be around them for your unconscious to see and pick up and to realize, oh, it's not really as hard as it seems, one, or it's these little tweaks if I make, which is what's going to get the result. So that's a really huge piece to that. And then the other thing that I really wanted to say earlier is like, because we're talking about habit, is that I personally believe the habits for us humans and what drives us and what keeps us in a behavior, it's actually at the core. It really affects everything else. For example, we may have limiting beliefs or have a poor identity or have some other sort of issue or turmoil. And the behavior that those beliefs, identity, and turmoil cause can become habit. So even if we work on our beliefs and our identity and revisit our past to work through that stuff, we can essentially become a new person and still be doing the same things as we were before. Yeah. 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 Wow. Yeah. 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 So there's a lot of talk about, it takes about 14 days, 17 days, or even 21 days to form habits. And in some ways, it's a little misleading. It takes about that much time to actually to kickstart the habit, but that doesn't mean that it is full force there and it's going to help you do the thing with ease. So it takes about 2 to 3 weeks just to get to the point where your body becomes comfortable and it's easy to do and you're not thinking too much about it. And then you want to get to a point where habits start to engage you in the behavior. So, for example, if somebody wants to get into the habit of working out, then by about the second or third week, it'll be easy for them to go through the motions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when they don't feel like doing it, the habit's going to kick in and force them to go to the gym. That takes much longer. And it usually kind of varies. It really depends on who the person is, what the activity is, how difficult the activity is, and some of the other internal resistance that a person might have to that activity. For example, if someone is shy and embarrassed to go to the gym, that's going to add a more difficult component to it. But if that part is not there, then it's not going to be as bad. But I would say at least a good, and then another part would also be how often you're doing the activity. It's really important is how often you're doing it. So a good frame of reference is like just come and show up and do the thing regularly for about a good 6 months. You know, if you can do it every day, then that's great, but that's not necessary. But it's going to matter between how often you do it, plus giving your body the time for its cells to rearrange and the grooves to change, and then the receptors to become used to new or different emotions that the new behavior is creating. I know it's a long winded response, but hopefully it gives them a good framework. Yeah. 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 Oh, are you? I didn't know that. Yeah. 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 Now, especially when it comes to the human mind and body, as I had mentioned earlier, we are beings that need to be active or engaged. Like that's just the way how we are, which is why it's so painful to sit on a bus for 2 hours or on a flight for 3 hours because there's a need to move. Even when we're sleeping, we're actually moving quite a bit. It is said that we toss and turn about 10 to 20 times per hour while we're lay. Yeah. And when you look at like, it's almost as if sometimes when we want to relax and chill, the only way we can do it is by having a drink. Or I know some people use other things, and I'm not recommending it, but it's just reinforcing what I'm saying, that like we need to be engaged. And if we take something away, something else has to take that behavior's place. Otherwise, that need for being engaged, it's gonna go back to that old habit. And the yeah, yeah. For me, it's gonna be water. That's all I drink. I mean, I think water is nature's drink, and why would we do anything besides water? But what we want to do first is try to introduce the new behavior first before we take away the old. So if we drink too much soft drinks and we want to cut that down, well, let's first try adding in more water. So before we have the soft drink, we allow ourselves to have the soft drink, but we tell ourselves before we have the soft drink, we have to drink the water first, right? And that in itself is going to be helpful, because most of the time when we are craving like a soft drink, it's because we're thirsty, and water is going to fulfill that, quench that thirst better. And we've already have put something in our stomach, so then we won't need as much of the soft drink. But then we try to take away the old habit that we want to break once we started bringing in the new habit. And so in this particular example, it's kind of an easy one. It's like, okay, you want to stop doing soft drinks. As humans, we need to drink water. So what are we going to replace it with? We replace it with pure water. And we're going to start, as I mentioned, first with introducing the new behavior, and then slowly weeding out the old behavior. But what we don't want to do is just cut out the old behavior and that's it, because that's where the challenge comes. And the challenge comes from all the different reasons we talked about: the need for our body to be engaged, the like we can't have a vacuum, we need to fill that vacuum with something else, and all sorts of other things. So this is kind of the best way. Yeah. 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 Soft drink was too easy. Let's do something a little bit more. But before we do, yeah, but I'm kind of curious. I've taught, I've heard a bit about the needs, our core human needs. I'm just curious what Tony Robbins said they were, if you remember. Yeah, yeah, Yeah. Yeah. To be seen, to be seen, to be known, to matter. Yeah. 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 Connection, contribute, to be seen. Yeah. Yeah. But that's okay. It's okay. I don't need you to finish. I just wanted to get to the point about the scene and to be known. Because so the way that we're built is that we have these needs. We have these basic fundamental needs to be seen, to be known, to contribute, right? And then when that need comes up, and that need is coming up all the time, like multiple times per day. And when that need comes up, our brain, or another part of our brain, you can think of it as a defense mechanism, looks at that need to see that if it's safe or possible to be fulfilled, right? And based on our background and history and our environment, especially our upbringing and how we feel about ourselves and esteem, it looks at all of that stuff. And if the part of the brain that analyzes that need says, you know what, you're not worthy of having this need fulfilled. It's too dangerous. You're not deserving. Well, that need gets transmuted to other behavior. And yeah, yeah. But the need doesn't go away. It just transmutes into the easiest, the best possible way to fulfill it. And if you have grown up conditioned to think that translates to soft drinks, a lot of times you'll be drinking soft drinks, not because you're thirsty, not because you like the flavor, but because you have this need come up and your defense mechanism analyzed that need and said, based on your whatever, you're not deserving, worthy, or it's too dangerous to fulfill it. And it transmutes into soft drink. And this is one of those situations where I talked about earlier that sometimes we can have a we can fall into a pattern or behavior or even a compulsion, and on the surface it may seem like habit, but it could be a result of some other stuff. And this is an example of it being a different other stuff. And sometimes it helps to actually look at what am I really wanting, deeper. And if it's to be seen or to be connected, then maybe we call a friend or maybe we do something that will directly fulfill that need versus through some other ways, which can be more destructive and not as conducive. Yeah. Yeah. So many of us are carrying other people's pain and other people's yeah, behaviors as well. With ourselves, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. In many ways, it's a spectrum and it's different levels and intensities. But we all, being human, we all have a similar experience. Is that sometimes when a response or a behavior becomes too extreme and unhealthy, you know, it creates challenges. However, it's still a response and behavior that everybody has, and it might not be unhealthy for them. I do want to say a couple of things based on what you had said. As you know, I kind of went on a similar journey, though the cause of it were very different. And in the beginning, I was put on meds and I went through the traditional medical route as well. And I will be honest, in some ways it was helping, but in other ways it was actually making my condition worse. And I too went the route of abruptly stopping. And so going back to what you had said earlier about, you want to take it slow. I really want to stress that. I did it for whatever reasons, for lack of better awareness or even knowledge of what was going to happen. But the place I went by stopping abruptly was not a good place. And I too went had the same experience of being fed up with what I was being fed. Whether it was from the medical community or even the personal development, because I went into the personal development realm as well, reading books and all of that. And a lot of the advice, I felt like if you applied them, they would be great. But the challenge was applying them. When you've got so much internal stuff that's going on, you know, if you can't apply it, the most useful advice will not have any effect, or even the most simple. And I went on my own journey of like figuring it out for myself. And at one point, I had a lot of anger towards both the medical community and the personal development community. And I think now when I look back at it, I feel like that anger was to, in a way, to protect me from going back to it, because a part of my mind had realized that doesn't work and I have to continue on the path of what I was on, even though it was a long path and sometimes I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. But now that I have kind of found healing and I'm at a point where here I am talking with you intelligently about some complex topics, which would have been an impossible thing for me to do back then. I like what you said about how it's still important to not integrate it, but what you said was like to look at what they're bringing, because they're still bringing something valuable and it still needs to be looked at, and not just completely push everything to the side and say that only this works and that doesn't work and it has to be done this way. Yeah, yeah, and, yeah, 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 yeah. Or a good coach. Yeah, because I've met some coaches who still operate in that this is what you need and I can help you, even though they might not be able to help you. And I went through a bit of that as well. I like what you were saying with all of that. If I could add one more thing, it would be that w- this is something I experienced in my journey, which was I thought if somebody was renowned or was expensive, they had some weight and value. But in my own personal experience and experiences from people I know, that is not always the case. The most well-known, renowned, or whatever, they could still be missing the key insights that are going to be necessary for you to get the results that you seek. And the reason is because we humans, our mind, body, and our emotions, we are so complex that no one person could understand every facet of our being. And so I don't care how much somebody has studied a specific topic related to the issue you're experiencing, they will not, it's just not possible, will not have all the knowledge. Yeah. 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 They're not just dead people goals, but they're not even your voice. They're the voice of the old ways, the old patterns, the resistance, that the old habits that don't want you to change. That's not even your voice. And it's really important to understand in your journey, whether it's breaking habits or in other areas, differentiating your voice or the voice of your self-sabotage, because that's really really key. And our self-sabotage voice can sound so real. It can seem like it's our own voice, and it's our own decision, and we're thinking it and we're making it, but then and not in many cases it isn't. And with what you were saying, there was it reminded me of a quote: what got you here is not what will get you there. And it really applies to coaching as well. Like the coaching and training, what got you here may not necessarily get you there. But instead of jumping to the big coach to get you there, you still need the intermediate ones. So yeah, and so it's really important to understand as important to understand that, as well as you are seeking out different authors to help you in your journey, or different coaches or mentors to smooth the pave, for lack of a better word. Yeah. 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 And 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 now you know why it's a marathon, not a race, because of what we talked about in the beginning of this presentation, which is all our cells, tissues, and muscles and organs need to line up for an activity, and all the neural pathways need to be formed and deepened, as well as the receptors in our cells. And that takes time. It's not done instantaneously. So any sort of change just requires taking a bit of time. In fact, one of the most important advice I can give people is to go slow. It's it's really the only way. And I know the challenge with going slow is there's two main challenges. One is the society that we live in. It's all about like go 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 as fast as go as hard as hard as you can, as fast. Yeah, yeah. So we're conditioned to get results immediately. But the other challenge of going slow is that we might be putting in work and it might be difficult, but then we'll see other people going faster than us or doing other things and getting better results. And then it kind of creates this like jealousy, like, well, I want to be there. I don't want to have to go through this. And then as a result, it makes us want to speed things up. And that can be detrimental if we're not careful. Oh, yeah, which you're starting. Yeah. And so the key takeaway from Nawala is don't compare yourself. The key takeaway from me is go slow, combine the two, and you're going to do okay. Okay. All right. Mindlily.com. Yep. F- Facebook. Yeah. So, Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for all the kind words, Noala. And to be honest, I was kind of a little nervous in the beginning. I don't know if you might have noticed, but I have definitely warmed up. And I think this will be a really good format for us to just kind of get our ideas out, and hopefully it can resonate with somebody, especially someone who, like us, had tried everything but nothing worked. And this can probably provide some answers that can make the necessary shift. Yeah. Yeah. And I will add to that and say that as humans, we are built to contribute. It's just built into our whole essence. And I think some of the times when we are not feeling fulfilled or something is off, and or maybe we're angry because we don't have something, it's not because we lack something, it's because we're probably not giving. And if we can contribute and give, it can sometimes it magically shift things for us.